So now that we know a bit more about Mark Carney and his temper and his anger and what just kind of selfish behavior, well, turns out it's actually a crowd pleaser in this country. Not even joking. Not even joking. Global News points out the Liberals are gaining momentum under Prime Minister Mark Carney, expanding their lead over the Conservatives in the latest Ipsos poll for Global News. Prime Minister Mark Carney appears to have breathed new life into the Liberal Party as the Ipsos polling shows the party widening its lead over the Conservatives even further since Carney's arrival. The poll published Tuesday by Ipsos Public Affairs exclusively for Global News found that if the federal election were held tomorrow, the Liberals would secure 42% of decided voter support compared with the 36% for the Conservatives. So Conservatives are actually dropping, and that's because we pointed out Pierre Poilievre, instead of reminding people why we have these tariffs and going at the Liberal Party for ultimately creating these problems, is taking their rhetoric. Pierre Poilievre is parroting what people like Mark Carney are saying, and Chrystia Freeland and Dominic LeBlanc, just parroting the exact same thing the Liberal Party is doing. And that's what is costing him a lot of votes. Polling from MySauce last month found the Liberals topping the Conservatives for the first time in years, though the number was within the poll's margin of error. Tuesday's 7-point Liberal lead is beyond the 3.8% margin of error. Since 2021, Ipsos polling has shown the Conservatives consistently leading in the polls, outpacing the Liberals. But in February, that shifted when the Liberals finally edging out the Conservatives by a slight lead. Now it seems the Liberals' lead is gaining momentum, and they are in a majority government territory, explained Daryl Bricker, CEO of Ipsos Public Affairs. Based on the numbers that we're seeing in our polling at the moment, the Liberals would be knocking on the door for a majority, he told Global News. The poll also shows the NDP dropped 2 points in 3 weeks to 10% of decided voters, while the Bloc Québécois held steady at 6%. The Green Party has fallen by 2 points to 2%. The People's Party remains unchanged at 3%, and support for other parties has inched up by 1 point to 2%. That is crazy. That is crazy. And Carney, a former governor of Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, was officially sworn in as Prime Minister on March 14th, following Justin Trudeau's announcement of his resignation over 2 months ago amid declining popularity. What's also a fun fact is also the reason he resigned in that timing was because they were about to open up an investigation on his green slush fund. Now, I'll let people know that, and they're not even going to mention this on Global News, but I'm going to mention to you here that at the moment, they were going to do an investigation on the green slush fund, all the taxation that they were getting from Canadians that were squeezing out of regular Canadians, pledging support for climate agenda policies. They were going to investigate, and Trudeau decided to resign. That's one of the things, on top of declining popularity. The next federal election has not been yet set, but an early call is widely expected in the coming weeks. Carney's new role as Prime Minister comes amid the ongoing trade war started by the United States. The U.S. has already imposed a sweeping 25% tariff on Canadian goods and went into effect at the beginning of March, as did Canada's counter tariffs on American goods worth $30 billion. Steel and aluminum tariffs hit Canada and other countries last week, while global reciprocal tariffs are set to kick in on April 2nd from the United States. In response to the tariffs, Carney said Trump is trying to weaken the Canadian economy with unjustified tariffs as he warned about dark days brought on by the U.S. move. So again, this is why Pierre Poilievre is slipping. Because obviously the Canadian economy was in trouble way before Trump announced tariffs. Way beforehand. For many, many years, the Canadian economy was screwed. The country was falling off a cliff. And while Pierre Poilievre almost had a complete cakewalk to a conservative majority, all he had to do was stay course. All he had to do was stay course and remind people that we wouldn't be in this mess because of the Liberal Party's negligence to this country. He does a complete 180 and sides with them. Why? Because Trump. Oh, Trump put tariffs on. He's trying to steal our jobs. Ah! Pierre Poilievre using the exact same garbage rhetoric that the Liberal Party's doing. And the Liberal Party is exploiting this trade war to get more votes. So here's just a graph to an example here. This is two different graphs, two different polling. So the one on the left here is from Angus Reid, and this is before the trade war. This is literally just before the trade war started, before Donald Trump made those tariff threats. Look at the Conservative Party was at 41%. 41%. Liberals are at 24%. NDP, Bloc Québécois, 13 and 7%. Green Party, 3%. Other at 2%. And they also scrunch the numbers that say they will likely switch support to Liberals if it appears that the CPC could win. So meaning that the people that would have voted NDP, if they know Conservatives are going to get a majority, are going to side with the Liberal Party to block it. Which is kind of, this is why, it is a benefit to have multiple parties, have different voices, have different representation, but it's also kind of a mixed blessing. Because the NDP likes to play this game. The NDP likes to play this game that, we're our own independent political party and we're working with the people. But yet, if anything, that is going to give the Conservatives a bit of a boost, or is going to help, or they notice that the Conservatives are gaining ahead and having a momentum, the NDP immediately backpedals for the Liberals. As we saw with Jagmeet Singh aligning himself with Justin Trudeau. As we saw the coalition between that. So that's before the trade war. Now currently, look at that. Liberal Party at 42%. Boof! Just rose right up there. Conservative Party at 36%. NDP at 10%. Bloc Québécois at 6%. People's Party of Canada, 3%. That's Maxime Bernier. 2% for the Green Party. And 2% for the other party. So, how is it that a failing party, like the Liberals, that were just previously, that's why they kicked out Justin Trudeau, how do they automatically get to 42% to possibly having a majority lead? Especially when you see scandals like this. Because Mark Carney likes to paint himself as the new Liberals. They are the change that's happening in this country. Well, exactly how much change are we getting? So, Western Standard, Carney and his wife burned 242,000 liters of jet fuel on European networking tour and emit 612 tons of CO2. A guy who's lecturing people about the importance of carbon taxes and how carbon taxes are too low. He is now Prime Minister, jet setting off to Europe, as wasting 242,000 liters of jet fuel. The guy who goes around on a private jet emitting more emissions than you and I could do in a lifetime. Canada Parliament is currently suspended and Carney is not an MP. David Jacobs, this is a misdirection by Carney. The canceled carbon tax was set at $80 per ton of CO2. Carney's proposed shadow tax will mirror the European Union tax, which is set at $156 per ton CO2. So, again, Mark Carney is not eliminating the carbon tax. Mark Carney is taking it away from the spotlight, making it private, and you're still going to get the burden, because that $156 per ton of carbon, which is essential for life on Earth, that is now going to cost you, because it's a domino effect. If you're going to put that on big businesses, that's going to affect transportation, that's going to affect packaging, that's going to affect retailers, and that cost is going to go straight to you. So Mark Carney is not getting rid of carbon tax. Mark Carney is the definition of carbon tax. And not only that, he's doubling it, because he says it's too low. He is going to starve this country. Here's Mark Carney in Europe. Mark Carney says countries won't trade with Canada if they don't have a carbon tax. All the other countries that are trading partners with Canada don't have a carbon tax. United States, Mexico, China, all these different big trading partners don't have carbon taxes. None of them do. But Mark Carney is going to dug his feet in and restrict countries from trading with Canada and Canada trading with other countries if they don't accept and subscribe to this crazy climate agenda. Listen to this.
On the other hand, we have the opportunity to diversify trade. Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the European Union? Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the United Kingdom? Guess what one of the requirements will be to diversify trade to emerging Asia? Is to have a form of price on carbon. So we are able to think one step ahead. We're able to go out and see the world. We're able to help Canadian companies prepare. And you know what's going to happen 5 years, 10 years from now? If I have the pleasure of being in front of you, you'll be asking me the question, if we didn't do this, if we didn't help our companies get more prepared, the Americans are going to start caring about this again. They have elections every 4 years. They cared a great deal about this 3 months ago. Now all of a sudden they don't care about it. They're going to care about it again. We have an enormous opportunity here in Canada. The United Kingdom has an enormous opportunity. France has an enormous opportunity. Europe has an enormous opportunity to leapfrog over American companies where they're trying to turn back the clock and look inwards. We're going to take that opportunity.
You mean the same companies that are fleeing Canada because they can't afford to pay these carbon taxes, on top of mass inflation, on top of everything else, the supply chain shortages. Companies are leaving Canada to go to the United States because they don't have a carbon tax. They're going to all other countries that don't have carbon taxes. They're leaving this country. So explain to me how putting a carbon tax and threatening other countries that if they don't comply, they won't trade with us, is beneficial to this country. How is it even beneficial to the planet? This net zero garbage is crap. Carbon is essential for life. Carbon is what nourishes plants and trees that provide oxygen that we as living beings need to have in order to survive. There's even more, folks. This is the Kiev Independent, the Kiev Independent. Canada contributes additional $35 million towards restoring energy infrastructure in Ukraine. So not only is Mark Carney keeping the carbon tax, that he did that media stunt to trick people that he was getting rid of it, He's also sending more to Ukraine. Obviously. Obviously. Being a servant to NATO, being a servant to the WEF, being a servant to BlackRock and all the investment bank institutions that he's a part of course, he is dead set for war. But yet Mark Carney is supposed to be changed. We're not supposed to be like Justin Trudeau. This guy's even worse. Mark Carney invites Zelensky to the G7 summit in June. I don't think even Trudeau had the capacity to do something like that. I don't think Trudeau even had the mentality to be this insane. Mark Carney inviting Zelensky to the G7 summit. Why? What benefit would Zelensky be for attending the G7 summit? Other than the fact that we want those precious minerals. As Lindsey Graham would say, those precious minerals. We can't have Russia and China have them, so we got to have them. That's why we got to blow them up in smithereens. What purpose do you have for Mark Carney inviting Zelensky to the G7 summit? So here's Government EXE is corrupt. To weigh in on all this, Mark Carney has been prime minister for 72 hours. This is back on Monday here. For 72 hours, has flown to Europe to deliver a speech. His first words, his first speech as prime minister, was to stand with Ukraine, declare a crisis, and say Canada is the most European country outside of Europe. Outside of Europe. So much for Team Canada. And somehow, that's enough to convince people that he needs to lead this country and get a huge majority. Just moments prior to when the Conservatives were getting a lead. Moments prior when everybody was so angered at the reins of the Liberal Party. They were demanding change. They were demanding election. They were demanding that, God forbid, we have to get out of this nightmare. We have to get away from Justin Trudeau. Get away from any sort of neoliberal establishment ghoul that's corroded this nation. Now it's okay. Now it's okay. Why? Because of Trump. Because of the tariffs. Oh, can't have election because the tariffs are happening. It's war right now, folks. We can't have election. That's the guy who's supposedly defending Canada. That's the guy who screamed at journalists, Canadian journalists, and said he's following rules, he's following ethics to become prime minister, even though he's the most corrupted son of a bitch I've ever met. Got himself to become prime minister, and his first speech as now the leader of this country is advance warfare, declare a crisis, which we're living in a crisis. The Trump tariffs is not the worst of it. We have been living in a crisis, existential crisis, for quite a long time. But he chooses now to declare a crisis. Why? Because it's beneficial for votes. And say that Canada is the most European country outside of Europe. I guess if you're looking at monarchies, where a king and queen are just handpicked and you just govern over people with an iron fist, then yeah, I guess we're just like Europe. And sooner or later, we're just going to be like Germany and start arresting people and cracking the heads for Facebook posts. Or, God forbid, videos that contradict narratives. That is Canada, ladies and gentlemen. And if we don't do something fast, we are going to lose it. Whether it be Donald Trump in America or the globalist agenda that's already corroded this nation. That's why I've been saying this country needs a revolution. This country needs an entire revolt. We need Freedom Convoy 2.0, 3.0 to the next generation. Because we allow this to continue on, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And do you think they're going to allow Pierre Poilievre a step into Parliament? Do you think they're going to allow democracy to have someone like him or Maxime Bernier have a chance, have a moment in partaking in democracy? No. Absolutely not. And that's the whole intention of why they're doing this.